Welcome everyone to this September gathering showcase of the Hunter Living Histories group run out of the university and chaired by me, John Grabia, and Anne Hardy from Landmax Lab and Special Collections. We'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today, which is the Awabakal people of Newcastle. And we'd like to welcome and acknowledge their elders, both past, present and emerging, to this gathering. And we also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that you're all zooming in to us today from, and acknowledge their traditional custodianship of the lands, and also welcome any Indigenous peoples that are joining us today. With this featured showcase on mapping and GIS, and we have a special guest presenter here from the Spatial Lab, Mr. Graham Hill, who's been doing some experiments with some of our maps and plans in special collections that are online through our Living Histories platform and also our Flickr account. And we just decided to take the opportunity to invite other enthusiasts, past enthusiasts like Lachlan Weatherall, has done a lot of our similar mapping with regards to aerials and subdivision plans, and Professor Fryer in surveying, Emeritus Professor Fryer in surveying, who's obviously been inspiring us with surveys and their work with Monteith and Powers over the years. So mapping for us is very important, very crucial, but there are a lot of problems with it, and we really like to form close relationships with tech people to help us with our mapping, especially in the digital world. So we've got lots of mapping, but we've got particular things we'd like to be able to do with it. And Graham was one of these guys that walked in recently asking about it. And my biggest problem was how do you bend and warp a plan or a map to suit the landscape, which is originally created in a flat surface. I want something that's almost like some kind of 3D. To me, it's like a muslin cloth that can go over the landscape, but we can tuck into those nodules in the landscape that haven't changed across the last 200 years to help create a kind of a time machine for us, okay? This is very useful to students in especially architecture now, because these guys are having to design our world for the next 40, 50 years, and we don't know what we're going to be confronting with regards to climate change. So the more we know about everything about our region in terms of its geology, the indigenous landscape, with where wetlands once were, where sand dunes once were, where high places, the way that the landscape works, the way that water works, then the better we're going to be. So the sooner we need to work partnerships with tech people like Graham and Lachlan, and so over to you, Graham. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Joni. So, as Joni said, I'm Graham Hill from the Spatial Lab, and I'm here to present a demonstration app, web app that I put together recently. And screen time. And I'll just go through what I'll discuss. I'll give a brief introduction to the Spatial Lab and a look at why was the website app even built in the first place. Then we'll look at some of the options that are currently available that Joni just referred to. Look at how the demo website was created and the steps involved in getting the maps online and spatially placed. We'll do a live demo, and then we'll have a bit of an open discussion about where to from here, and Q&A and so forth. So the Spatial Lab was founded in 2022, a couple of years ago, by myself and Stephen Barr. Stephen Barr is a registered surveyor, town planner, and runs his own planning consultancy. We're both co-located in Carrington, and so we've got a lot of synergies, and we deal a lot in the urban planning, town planning space. So I was having a coffee with a Newcastle town planner probably a month or two ago, and we got talking about, was Susie Young from Place Wise, and I think she's attended some of these meetings in the past. And we got talking about Broadmeadow and some of the controversial sort of planning decisions that have been made there recently. And we just got thinking about what was the history of the site, because there's lots of water and sort of pedestrian movement issues that are there today. And we're like, well, how did all this actually come about, this pattern? So we knew we could access, some historical aerials, say on Google Earth, the time slider, but it doesn't go back anywhere near far enough. And once you get below 2007, it's just blurry. Like it's like old satellite imagery or something, and it's not very useful at all. Then we've got aerial photography, which goes back to around the 1940s for Newcastle. And by then, already the urban form was set for most of the city. So we need to go back further than the 1940s to really see what was happening there. So Susie pointed me to the Living Histories website, and I was able to find some old maps, and she referred to a 1910 map, which seems a rather popular map for looking at the history of Newcastle, and Gioni as well. I'll go over that a bit more next. But one of the problems we were having with just viewing the maps and side by side, with what's there today, and this is near National Park, Newcastle West in town, is it's really hard to see the patterns when you're looking at it side by side. And like here, Cottage Creek stands out, and maybe some of the street patterns around Parry Street, Bull Street, in the south eastern corner there. But other than that, it's really hard, like the train lines and the road angles and bits and pieces and the bridge across to Carrington just doesn't, it throws you out. You can't really work out where you are. So that was ultimately the reason for developing this sort of application, was to actually just overlay the plans spatially so that you can adjust the transparency or use a slider and actually compare with what was there to what's there now. And I've always wondered about Burwood Park in town. It's that little park at the corner there of King Street and Stewart Avenue. And I'm like, what a weird spot to have a park. But if you look at the 1910 map there and see the park, it was actually reasonably sized and not all split up and not surrounded by busy roads. But now it's like you wouldn't even want you wouldn't have a picnic there, you wouldn't want to take your kid there and kick a football. Like, it's not the place to sort of go. But just that's just one local example that I always wondered, why is there a park at such a busy intersection? Mm-hmm. So I did develop a very basic map initially, and I came out and saw Gioni and just wondering what else already existed before I spent too much more time on it. Had anyone else done anything like this before? What's available? But Gioni showed me how he was currently doing things, which was spatially referencing. It's called geo-referencing the maps within Google Earth Pro, which is fine, which is, it's a good solution for Gioni, and he was able to use it in lots of his discussions with people. I think he had some primary school kids out recently for one of the local primary schools, and he used it as the main sort of discussion point. The kids could easily interpret it. So the only problem with using Google Earth Pro is that it's a lot harder to share. You need to have the software installed on your computer. You need to know how to use it. And it's not quite as good as some other GIS software in terms of referencing the plan with your control points and being able to skew the original image to make them all fit. So there's some better options there. Gioni also pointed me to a number of other mapping systems, mostly index sort of systems, and this is one by Lachlan Weatherall, who's in the room here, for the historic subdivision posters that used to be around, and they're quite large posters. I remember seeing them at Lake Macquarie City Council as well, and there's hundreds of them. So for that scale sort of mapping and the fact that it's an actual poster, this concept of the index and clicking on the shape and then having that poster pop up makes perfect sense. But it wasn't quite what we were looking for, because we want to be able to overlay the really old plans to currently, and being able to adjust that transparency. So we moved away from the indexing. And this is probably another one that you've seen. It's put out by New South Wales Spatial, their historical aerial viewer, which I would imagine to most people is quite overly complicated. If you're just looking for some old plans or aerial imagery, we can search for a location. It seems a bit slow now that I'm sharing my screen, but the New South Wales Spatial has recently been mosaicing a lot of these historical aerial imagery, and sort of what were tiles or contact prints. They've geo-referenced it and used specialised software to merge all the imagery. And 1944 is one that's available. That's zooming in on the actual screen. Sorry. It's one that's available for Newcastle, and it's not too bad, and it's basically the same sort of concept as to what we were looking at. They do have the swipe tool, but eventually, I don't know how long it's going to take, but there'll be all these red squares covering the screen, and that's the index of all the contact prints that are available. And when you click on one of those red squares, to the right-hand side, you'll get a list of all the available images, the originals, and you can go and download those, which isn't too bad. But the actual contact prints, they're quite hard. You have to spend a lot of time to work out the street patterns and where you are. It's a lot of research basically involved. And also, on a similar theme, the federal government has recently released their historical aerial viewer for all of Australia. I've done it again, sorry. you can again search for particular locations. Might be a little bit too slow, but the problem with this one is that there's no mosaicing. You only get the contact prints, and what they've also done is put the contact prints in the orientation in which they were taken at. So when a plane flies over the area, they loop backwards and forwards. So every second run is upside down or twisted, or so a lot of people are going to really struggle to orientate themselves with those original prints, and you can't even rotate it. So you've got to actually download the images, take it into imaging editing software, and then rotate it back to normal. So it's a lot of work for every end user to have to do that. So not particularly user friendly.
In one sentence, why would they have not turned them upside down at the point when they're creating it? I mean, where's that all
seems
obvious?
Rather obvious. Most contact prints even have a little N or arrow or something on them to let you know which way was north. But
or rework now.
Yeah, and for everyone.
If you look at contracts, just do it while I think about what the outcome's going to be.
Oh, well. It basically works the same as the New South Wales one, but instead of it being red squares, it's a dot for each centre of the contact print. So you don't even know the coverage that you're looking at. So, yeah, not the greatest.
You get to learn a lot about flight paths when you're searching it, though. You see the route of the plane. Oh, that dot there might be the one I want.
Yeah. So, to get started on developing an app, the very first thing we really have to do is get these historic plans geo-referenced. So where does this plan sit correctly on Earth? So we used ArcGIS Pro, but there's other software. There's QGIS, which is an open source package that can do this, and there's many others as well. But we use the property boundaries, the street, other aerial imagery to help us locate these old plans. So we've been lucky so far that the 1910, the 1890 and Pindima city map have all had streets and property boundaries that still exist today. And we can more or less get coverage across the map. You really aim for at least one control point in every corner, and as many others as you can find to twist and warp the image. There's also lots of transformation options, and Google Earth probably does one of the simpler ones, which is basically just rotate the image. But there's ArcGIS Pro has 7 other types of transformations, and basically the more complex it is, the more it goes away from its original shape. So you can see that on the screen there, the third order polynomial, the image is quite warped. But you really just aim for the best results. There's no right or wrong answer to this. You're after the least amount of errors, just visually checking, and it doesn't take too long to reference these images. The next step we did was, okay, how do we get this online for the apps or website or whatever to consume? So we tiled the plan. So I don't know if you ever used Google Maps. Sometimes when you zoom in and out, you see all these little squares draw. That's the tiling scheme. So we've done exactly the same thing with these plans. And what that does, it enables the plan to draw quickly at any scale. So it basically draws within a few seconds at whatever scale you're looking at it, because it only loads what it needs to load to fill your screen. And then each tile is suited to the scale that you're at as well.
So does the original resolution that I scan those plans out help you? Because I can give you a larger version of this on a higher res. Will that noticeably change the detail? Because
Well,
been always the difficulty with Google Earth is trying to get the maximum amount of detail without overloading Google Earth with too big.
Well, you probably wouldn't overload it by using this tile option.
These little bits.
Yeah, because it basically makes thousands of 256 by 256 pixel images, and they're about, I don't know, 5 kilobytes each or something like that. And so, yeah, the better the original that we've got to work with, the better the results is when you zoom right in. But whether people are going to have to need to do that, that's the question, really. That's what you're sort of aiming for. At what resolution can they interpret the old plan and have it readable? Some of the old handwritten stuff I find unreadable anyway, just because of the way it was written and the cartography, but other people would have no problems. And going forward, with running, writing and things like that's probably going to be a lot more younger generation coming through. They're going to struggle even more than what I did.
Yeah.
So we have our plans, we have them shared online. Then we need some sort of interface for people to interact with all these plans. And what else do we want on the actual map? So it's about this, what's going to be the other thing that they're going to the other imagery that they compare to these old plans, property boundaries, and what sort of controls or widgets, buttons do we want on their application as well. So this is a live demo of the site, and I'll just go through some of the features. But if anyone has any questions, just ask along the way, and
So this was to be our capital city.
No, this is Newcastle. This is what we call the 1910 map. Well,
Pindom is the third. We put Pindom into Spark.
Further,
like an imagination about what it could be.
Yeah. So we've got Newcastle 1910. So we can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's what I would refer to as like a layer control, where you can switch between various plans. So I can turn off the 1910 map and turn on the NAG's 1890 map. Just go back to the 1910 map for now. You can zoom in and out with the buttons on the screen, or if you've got a mouse, you can use the wheel, or depending on what sort of device you're on. Pinch your fingers. It works on a mobile phone as well. It doesn't have to be a laptop. We could work on. No, I can only use, because I'm sharing my screen. I just can't. It wants to zoom in and out on PowerPoint. When you zoom in far enough, you get the actual current property boundaries, and that's live from New South Wales Spatial. So they update automatically. There's some areas where this map's in and some areas where it's out. Like, it's hard to say whether the original map is highly accurate. Like, some of the streets look like they've been drawn rather wide. That's probably for cartography sort of effect rather than true scale. But they're close enough that you can work out where you are in the city. What you can also do with that property is click on it. on this one here, and you'll get the address of that current property that's there.
So the information like gasworks became very handy when the Waratah community had all those issues with the gasworks in their area with contamination, but there were no records
Yeah, okay.
surviving from the borough councils at the time, I think. So we had to rely a lot on these early mappings to get exactly where they were.
So how you go about comparing the old to the new, one way is this swipe tool, and what that enables you to do is, let me do it. So you can just drag that across. So whatever is that Market Town shopping centre, that was a gasworks. So, sorry, it's playing up. You can also, if you click on these three little buttons, three little dots against each layer, you can also adjust the transparency. If you want to do it that way, you can slide that backwards and forwards.
That's a much more useful, the transparency.
You can search for an address and it'll take you to that address there as well. It searches anywhere in the world, but you really want to sort of limit it to sort of Newcastle, so it doesn't hurt the suburb in, and it should give you the results as to whichever's closest to wherever you're currently located. And you can see there that National Park, soccer grounds, and most of Hamilton South was previously like creeks and sort of marshy.
Prone to flooding.
Yeah, and so no wonder the soccer fields are always wet and don't drain well, and so forth. So helps explain all that. I think I spent, once I geo-referenced this map, I just spent hours just moving around the city going, oh, do those people know that they live on an old rubbish tip or an old coal mine? Or
I think they do now. From the look of the hits on the Flickr site alone, it's the most popular, one of the most popular images. So I think people are checking their houses, because look, the beauty of this particular plan is all the waterways and the creeks and everything. It's fantastic if you're trying to get an understanding of how the water works.
There's lots of clay pits and little, I don't know what all these, what the little dam things, all sorts of stuff all over the place. And interestingly, every house is colour coded, whether it's black for a weatherboard timber house or red for a brick house. Yeah. We don't even know that information today.
No.
You know what I mean? Like
this is always described to me as a military map for some reason.
Because it's done by a village, Barrett. If you go down to the corner, it was Colonel Lieutenant Barrett. So
okay.
Barrett, Lieutenant Corporal Royal Engineers.
At the top of the class.
Yes, but
it wasn't Barrett.
The other thing you can do on the map is actually rotate it to.
So how do you do that? I haven't been able to work that one out.
With a normal mouse, it would be. I've been trying. If you're using it on a mobile phone or a tablet, or you've got finger access with your screen, just two fingers on the screen and just rotate it, flip it around. With a mouse, it's holding down the right button, and then you can rotate it to have the text straight. And but everything rotates. The imagery and the property boundaries all rotate with it, so it's all consistent. there's lots there to look at. I'm always fascinated that in Carrington this bridge went straight across there, and it does say that it was demolished. So at some point, it must have taken them years to draw this map. Between them collecting the data to draw it, and when they actually finished published it, there's an amendment there that it's been demolished and the Carrington Bridge wood has been crossed out.
It would be interesting to compare them to the NAGS maps because we've got them from about 1880 to 1905, which is just before this map was drawn. So it'd be interesting to see whether that bridge is there.
It's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
And just the changes to the landform around the edge of the port, like even like all this at honeysuckle, you know how that's all changed. Struggling here to
So that's what's very useful to the architecture students. I want to know what they're building. And when you're dealing with this sort of thing, even just trying to understand the original shoreline, a lot of it's been filled in. We get questions about how was this significant to Aboriginal people, and I say to them, well, it was all part of the harbour at the time, you know. So there's areas of Newcastle, I mean, that completely been resculpted by engineers and surveyors for the imperative of the port to get coal in and out of here as effectively and efficiently as possible.
The other thing you can do if you just want to give yourself more real estate on the screen is just hide that left-hand side, just again. On a mobile phone, it'll hide to the bottom. Also got the 1890 plan, older again, and just not as much. Like obviously in that 20 years, there was a lot of growth in the streets of Newcastle.
This is the one that I always describe the Pasha Bulka flood with, because around Steel Street, where you've got photographs of cars underwater, that's where the wetland was on this. See that? That ancient dune system. I always show that ancient dune system because we've got records relating to Aboriginal burials and things taking place. We're not told the exact locations, but we know that's where it's occurring. It just gives people a bit of a heads up when you're doing your flood modelling or whatever it is. This is what you really do need. You need this kind of information. The insurance companies know this. That's why they, adjust people's premiums. If you're getting a very high premiums, because they know where these areas are going to flood, but a lot of people wouldn't have a clue what they're on a lot of the time without this kind of map.
And just recently added the Pindima city map. So if you click on the three dots beside that one, you can actually just press zoom to it or jump you there. And we can rotate the map again.
That's great. This is fascinating because I mean it's just a little ordinary track now, but it could have been the grand the grand road to the Gallipoli Cathedral that they, it's weird having a look at this thing, comparing it to what is there now and what could have been in terms of the nation's capital.
The road's still there.
Yeah, some of the road patterns
Clark Street
Street
is that central one. I forget what they call it. Around.
Yeah, we're able to, the street names match.
So with Google, when I've tried to put this in Google, I just can't get it. Google can stretch it. You can skew it a bit this way and skew it a bit that way, but you just can't get it to fit across the whole thing properly. There's always some aberration somewhere. So.
And a fair few of the parcels have actually been created there and they match.
The National Archives, the National Library, the War Memorial Hall would have been located on the way to the Gallipoli Cathedral. On that drive down Clark Street. And I always love looking at it now because around the Clark Street, just a little humble roundabout now. If only they knew, And then I start thinking, well, how different would Australian history have been if Pindima was our national capital rather than that cold, miserable place called Canberra. Imagine sailing in to your nation's capital. You would have been happier.
The short list for the capital sites.
Yeah.
Did it make it to the shortlist?
So then after that thought, I then think, well, why can't we suggest it and say that, look, Australia's in a bit of a trouble at the moment. We can't seem to make a decision to save our lives. So why don't we go for the Pindima model and see whether that can work and just rebuild and our nation's capital in Pindima and see how much more wonderful our future might be. What do you reckon about that one? Should we pass it?
With a nice little bullet train, 50 kilometres.
It's a very fast train from Canberra.
I'm sure
Yes, that's a
Yes.
quick introduction to the app. We have the metadata there as well down the left-hand side with links back to the originals. Want to get back to those?
Do you have the Northumberland County Council maps, because they were the best maps that were done recently, about 52.
Yeah,
The water bullet planes.
yeah. I know there's a lot of maps there, and because of my history with Lake Macquarie City Council, I did work with the Northumberland planning scheme. We used to have these
in Lake Macquarie when the Northumberland scheme
Yeah.
was made, but they did go around and test every house to make sure that it was where the border or which they show on the map.
Yeah, we used to have these really huge books, maybe they were 1.2 meters by about 1 meter. We didn't even have a desk big enough in the in the staff area to open them. Now we refer to them as the Harry Potter books in the planning. They were all scanned, but unfortunately, I don't know where the original books have ended up. They might be in long-term storage, or
We hope.
they might be destroyed.
The thinking that we're always fighting against is this idea that once something's been digitised, that's it, you can just chuck it. And we've just constantly been telling, we've been digitising stuff since the 1990s, never destroy your originals, because the technology always gets better and better and better, and your machines get more and more powerful, and the abilities to do wonderful things happen. But if we trashed all the snowballs that we scanned them the first time, then you'd never be able to scan them off the originals again. You'd be stuck with what you digitised in 2008, 1996. So at the moment, I know that City of Newcastle is scanning all their snowballs, and even now, we used to think that our snowballs were big as all, as we've got to do the whole lot again, because digitisation is just, there's just technology marches ahead. Now with this sort of stuff, I mean, the thing that when someone asks me a question about what happened on this site, I want to be able to take them through layers of time, and we can do some of it with Google. For instance, how many layers can you put on these kind of things, and are they all kind of visible? If I wanted to compare two of these layers with one another, if we had a modern day Pindima map, we wanted to again compare it to this one. How many layers, and how far is it before we outdo our welcome in terms of asking you to do this and asking you to do that? I mean, because you've got businesses to run, and this is our issue, is that a lot of the time I can send a KML file out there with a not so nice match, but it'd be wonderful if I could get a really nice fit with some of these things done.
So there is a cost associated with having the imagery plans tiled and posted online, and that is the cheapest form, that method to serve the plans up. You do need like a GIS server to make the image accessible to these sorts of apps. These plans they're publicly accessible because they work in a publicly accessible map. So anyone could really go and get them and bring them into their own mapping application or their own app.
Which they do.
In much the same way I could bring in all those mosaics from New South Wales Spatial. So I could have the 1944 aerials in here in 5 minutes if I wanted to. But yeah, you've got to, it's got to be user friendly. So once you get maybe over 10 or 20 plans, how's this going to work? You're going to end up with so many and it's going to be long. How do they find the plan of interest? And so you need a layer search capability, like which sort of plans am I looking for? But yeah, ultimately, this was just a demo website to get the conversation started.
Going,
yeah. And I'm hoping that, probably the worst thing that happens is everyone just goes off and does their own thing and there's no central repository. So if, say, if Council and Leighton Quarry Council, Maitland and so forth, all have their own sort of plans that cover bits and pieces, you don't want to be jumping between all the different council apps.
But see, that's what Lachlan's worth that you showed with that subdivision thing. That's what got us thinking about this, because when we did our presentations for the City of Newcastle, the State Library, I was saying, okay, this is what Lachlan's been able to do with all our stuff that's been publicly freely available, right? The gaps in it, it's what's sitting in your repositories that for some reason you aren't making as easily accessible. Make it as easily accessible, because it doesn't matter who's got it. What matters is the canvas that we get to present it on, and it's like a patchwork quilt. Now, once you've done all the subdivision plans and you've wrestled out of the National Library its collection, and you've wrestled out of the State Library its collection, and you've wrestled out of the local studies its collection, then you fill in as many of the gaps with your subdivisions. Then we start thinking, well, what about oral histories and video footage and all that sort of stuff? Can that be also geo-referenced to appear? So when we click on that stuff, we learn as much as we can about the history of that piece of land, because that's what people keep writing to us about, no matter whether they're councils or whether they're individual consultants or whether they're surveyors or whether they're students. We don't have the full coverage of it, but everyone, they might be working in their own little areas, but they're all needing things from time to time. So from our point of view, we'd like to be able to put out as much of this material and try and get our colleagues in the national and state and, other regional repositories to do the same. So if there's some kind of cooperation that can happen, that would be great. At the moment, we've got a team that's working on a mapping exhibition, and we're trying to articulate all the most important maps of this region from the moment Europeans arrived here under the idea of colonisation. That's where all our mapping began, right? So there's key maps which are like everything. It's like a guide to everything that a Novocastrian or a Hunter Valley person should know about. If we can get them done, then that would be a fantastic bedrock to start doing it. And things like the Borrelia, charts or plans, they are so hard to put into, because the river since 1801 has had a number of flood events happen, so it's no longer the same run. But there are ghost billabongs in the landscape of today that were part of the original run that you can sort of match it to. But you need your wizardry software to get it to work on that.
Well, this is, university does have a spatial science faculty. So whether there's an option there that students could take on the actual concept of an app and learn to manage the server, the data, the application, geo-referencing it and so forth, that would make them job ready, I guess you would call it. Because they're actually managing something that is live, and they're responsible for it.
I've never heard of it. Where's it run from?
I don't know. I just seen it advertised.
Well, I know that there are people in School of Engineering that teach GIS. So a couple of those associate professors are very, very good at it. So I would imagine they're somewhere, but I'm unaware of the so. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If I was just a member of the public and went, oh, gee, I'd like to play with that, how do I do it?
So there's a few ways. If you just Google the Spatial Lab historic maps, something like that. We've posted on LinkedIn as well. If you follow the Spatial Lab, I've just got to get my
QR code at the end.
Yeah, and the QR code. I've just got to get my. It won't go to the next. There we go. We've also got a QR code there that if you've got a mobile phone, grab the QR code on the left, and that'll take you straight to the application. But yeah, like it's that. This was designed just to get the conversation started. Where do we want to head? Whether there's some grants or something like that might come out from state government, or someone like New South Wales Spatial is happy to host it and the imagery
So, Graham, so this was done as a demo for you, is that right? So it's not nothing to do with Newcastle Council, it's not.
No.
Pure, okay,
Yeah,
right.
no. Well, so Susie's runs Placewise, sort of town planning and urban design. So she's just a consultant.
We
as well.
first met Susie with the Broadmeadow project that involved a couple of groups that we've been involved with on the Broadmeadow project. So we scanned a whole heap of material for Shane Blatchford and the late Bernie Curran that were sort of organising a group to put together a plan, because the state government just wants to fill it full of housing. And we said, look, we've got pictures from 1900 where the whole place is underwater. It's a wetland. Unless you want to reproduce the same problems that you've got now in Lismore with people building on flood-prone land, what's the point of building a housing subdivision on an area that the insurance companies are not going to be able to give you an affordable price to insure? You're going to create a whole lot of pain. Put a bit of thought into what's gone there. So we've been working with the architecture built environment people as well. They've been doing that a couple of meetings ago. One of their students came and presented on the thinking that they've been doing. Just such brilliant students, dealing with water issues. Right, so they start with the base plans and they deal with the problems before they start putting people and activity on top of them. So yeah.
But it's not. Sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
So it's not specific to Newcastle. This thing couldn't work anywhere.
Oh, yeah,
Right. And I know a little bit about mapping. So it works on WMS. I think it's called, isn't it? The tile system. WMS.
Yeah, very similar to WMS. It's actually WMTS. It's a web mapping tile service.
And can this connect to open source rectified maps?
Yeah.
So there's a thing called mapwarper.net.
Yeah.
Where open source people rectify their own maps and reference maps, which is
as long as it's shared in the
right. So this thing could have a layer which connects direct to mapwarper sources.
Potentially, would have to look into that one.
That's possible.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking this thing it's so hard to find websites where you can actually compare maps through time, and everyone comes up with their own solution. So
the ones I've seen that the Graham's been able to do is much better than the mapwarper.
Yeah, I mean mapwarper is just one map at a time.
We've tried our best to
its purpose is to rectify maps to use in other applications.
Yeah,
it's not
but
really
if we're going to bring in the raw imagery.
Yeah, so you take a wiki map and put it into mapwarper, correct it, and then use that correction in other applications.
It just depends how it's served out.
Yeah.
As to whether we can access it directly.
It's definitely WMS because I use an application called Open Historical Map, which is using rectified maps to create, reinterpret them, add your own details of what's there now.
Okay.
You had a quick look at it, John?
Well, I think so. So I'm coming from the.
It's not the solution we're looking for here. No.
Well, look, I've just got a whole bunch of wish lists. And when we had the innovation team, I spent half an hour explaining them to them, and they said to me, "Well, You've just spent $900,000, John, just with the amount for half an hour. So I'm not sure
this
that what I want to
this
do.
sort of application is not specific to Newcastle. If you could find a
No,
state grant for it,
No,
then you can start with something
But
and build
look,
on it. Use
look-
open source community. You don't have to spend. You don't have to pay a lot of people converting maps to get work in this system. It's already done.
Let me jump in and ask a hard question, which is, we're in the 21st century, and I would find it hard to believe that we need to develop something in Newcastle when one of the problems you said was, well, there's Newcastle and there's Lake Macquarie, and then there's New South Wales, and then there's a federal one. There must be someone in the world that's already done this, and can't we piggyback on someone that's already done it? And
we'll find them.
and I'll feed into you here brilliantly, which is in Bristol, there's a guy at the university there who has a map, and one of the layers shows where all the bombs landed in Bristol in destroyed houses. And I spoke to him and I said, this looks really good. Is this used elsewhere? And he said, oh yeah, they're using that in Leicester and another town. I said, and what about in London? He said, oh no, they did their own thing. I said, okay, so my tough question is there must be someone out there who's got who has worked out all of this stuff that we can link into. Because if we try and develop something in Newcastle, I think we'll just never get there. It'll be too hard.
So you're a commercial business looking for some work.
Well, this just came about because Susie's a friend, colleague, and she needed it, and we got talking about it, and I thought this would actually be handy for anyone. So if there's someone out there that's willing to host all the imageries, and there's an app that already exists, well that's great. That's the
so there's an app
solution.
and there's the source material.
We haven't found. I mean, I haven't found anyone that does everything.
Neither have I.
Because we've been trying to do this kind of thing for years and talking to people about it. So if someone had already done it, they would have told me, they've already solved that.
And if it's not easy to use, if you can access every historic plan all over Earth, and imagine the catalogue and searching for it and trying to. So it was just, we wanted to be somewhat just Newcastle.
So there's another question: is the stuff that you're putting in there as your data points or whatever? Is that compatible with what other people are doing with their maps? Your grid referencing system and scales and all of that. Is your metadata, for want of a better word, does that match what they're doing in Bristol?
Possibly. Well, most web tile services use the Google Mercator projection, which covers the Earth. So that's why the imagery squares and can all overlap, and you can use them basically in any API. So that's become a bit of a standard, I guess you would call it, that projection.
Okay, that's all.
Any questions from the Zoomers? Speak up. Don't want the physical people in the room hogging their dinner. Just jump in like an Irish get together.
Not a question, Joni, but just a point to make that Newcastle Council's already done detailed flood mapping, very extensive flood mapping. It's online.
And the experience that I've had with the English stuff is it's good, but goes only back a certain way. If you wanted to target any area of England, I like to see the historical mapping go back as far as it can. And with Newcastle, we've got a pretty good idea of our key maps and key dates. So hopefully when this exhibition gets launched, when it's going to be launched? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay, so in 2 weeks we'll have a a mapping exhibition, which will give generally a bit more of a wider audience knowledge of our key maps, all right, key charts. And then we'll probably be having another session of the Hunt of Living Histories dedicated to mapping in November. So if anyone has a great idea between now and then to try and bring this stuff together, given our base charts and what the work that needs to be done. I mean, given that 1797, all we've got is an ice sketch by Shortland, but still contains a lot of interesting information, which, if properly, geo-referenced, would be very useful. We don't care how raw the chart is, as long as that information somehow can be mapped and provided to the wider community.
I've got three
in 3 weeks.
I've got 3 hand-drawn maps of Minmai.
Yeah.
And do you think I can lay them over each other? And
No.
they can't.
Because that geo-referencing is the key thing. And to me, it's almost like turning whatever you've got into some transparent cloth or malleable thing that you can massage into the Google Earth.
Photoshop used to have a feature like a warping one that would lay a grid over it, and you could grab any intersection point and pull it around, like playing with quilt.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we need.
But that's what georeferencing does, or rectifying does.
Yes.
So
not just the 4 corners.
No. You pick if it's a well drawn map, then 4 corners would be enough, like you were showing earlier.
Okay.
But once it starts to get distorted,
and
it's an eye sketch, then you add as many control points as you need. It does the warping for you.
Good. Okay.
It's not as crude as a grid.
I think
you put a point anywhere where you can find a cross reference from like the windmill on the top of the hill.
Yes.
Appears in multiple maps. And you still know where that is today. You can cross it from that point.
Okay.
Almost every map.
Okay. Good.
The Pintimer city map had 28 control points.
Okay. Okay.
Just because for whatever reason. So if the map was ever folded, that's going to throw it out, because when it gets scanned, just little deviations in the paper are still there, and it throws it out by a metre or so.
Even if there's linen, if the map was with linen, I remember Russell and I going through one of the online maps and just getting rid of all the linen in between Dangar maps, bringing it all back together again, so that it could be as accurate as possible when we tried to overlay it, because the Dangar map is another, or the Joseph Cross, they were around 1828, 2 really good maps. They also have a lot of Aboriginal place names on them, as does another one, Bebb's Earth of Port Stephens, which is a brilliant map. And in comparing Port Stephens with Newcastle's been completely redesigned, the port, but Port Stephens from 1826 to today is hardly untouched. It's incredible. So that just goes to show you what the coal imperative in Newcastle has done to the landscape.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is helpful or not, and you're probably all over it, but at one stage I was looking for maps and things, and I managed to get very good contacts inside Newcastle Port Harbour Authority, or whatever they're called, and they had the most amazing collection of maps going right back with anything to do with the harbour, because they regularly surveyed and apart from the soundings, they did the foreshores and the nearby areas. So they had a monstrous collection. And so a lot of that stuff we were talking about where the border of the Hunter River moved and so on, they were the people who were doing the mapping of that. And I suspect they kept it. They didn't hand it on to the lands department, or they didn't hand it on to somebody else. They were their own authority, sort of thing. I don't know if you've ever seen that collection.
No.
They have it, well, they had it in Newcastle 20 years, 30 years ago.
I did do a bit of research, and I did find an online shop selling antique maps like the originals, and there's maps of Newcastle for sale for $1,000, and it's the original. So I just googled, I think it was antique map room or something like that. They've got quite a collection as well. But interestingly, you can grab the JPEG off their site and you can geo-reference it. Don't need the original. They might not like it.
Mm.
This is probably nothing to do with so much of what we're talking about, except that I have a photo here of the Hunter River at Maitland as it was in 1878. And you could see now why it would have been called Horseshoe Bend. We have a little suburb called Horseshoe Bend, but now the river just goes straight across because of all the flooding and all the work that they've done on it. But it used to be.
Engraving, that one.
Yeah, and it's, that's relevant.
That's another very popular one, that one. And then, look, this engraving then points to another source of if we can sort of then layer things that are in a particular angle. There's a lot of visual information, which again is very, very frustrating. Russell did a bit of it when he was experimenting with his overlays. He also tried to reference paintings with arcs, panoramas, and things like that.
And underground stuff as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, we're asking for things that technology hasn't evolved to provide us with, but we'll just let you know what's out there and what we want to put in, because when someone asks for something, it's always good to, if they're interested in a particular point in the landscape, that we can show them in a number of different forms. Okay, this is what it looked like in 1830. This is what it looked like in 1860. This is what happened when a plane threw over it in 1940. This is an illustrated Sydney News of that same location.
Could Elijah Goffer come to the service desk on level 3, please? Thank you.
Off you go, Elijah.
I'll just ask a question. When we talk about like it would be useful to have collaborators and have a joint project. Could you envisage that like there could be multiple administrators or crowdsourcing if people are trained from different institutions?
Yeah, definitely. There's potential there that as long as the imagery is hosted and shared in a open standard format, that it could all come to a central application website.
Which would be very useful, like I said, rather than multiple people.
Yeah, just doing all their own thing. Different bits and pieces.
I can imagine there's like Trove with all the newspapers and 100,000 people around Australia doing text correction. And my excitement with what you're doing is that this is the mapping equivalent of Trove, and you don't have a handful of people doing corrections. You double the stuff down, and you use 100,000 people to pull the things into shape.
Some content like this is I've done the overlaying, but we could have the subdivision posters index on there as well. Like it could be that blend of an index, dot points of photos or whatever. I think your catalogue system already has a little mapping thing on the side.
There's something.
There is one on Living Histories.
Yeah. So if that was openly accessible as well in terms of that coordinate and that data that links to the original image and the metadata that you've got on there, then that pin could be shown on this application as well. So you're linking everything together. So it's becoming a huge library of resources, spatially.
Because there's no way we can describe a map, with all the information in it. That 1910 map, we could be here for another 100 years recording every single little detail and contour. And there's no real way of us being able to let people know either. So it's like, we're kind of frustrated by the fact that there's a lot of information. When a student asks us about something, there's a lot of information I can direct them to, but I don't have a canvas to sort of, unless I can export the Google Earth overlays, that's the canvas I communicate this to. And once they see it, they get it. But it's like with those NAGS maps, we can take them through, 1880 through to 1905. And the reason why the Carrington Public School kids were so good there is because I was having troubles geo-referencing it until the Carrington Public School came in. And that had been there all the way through. So I had a great control point with that school that helped sort of fit Stockton, because it just shows Stockton changing from just bushland into a start to subdivide everything. So
And I've got a map of Murrundi which was the terminus of the railway, and on the map, their cathedral is about 50% bigger than Newcastle's cathedral on the map, if the scale is correct. And I always find that fascinating. Was that real, or did they just draw it there and it's not real that it was going to be that size? That's what historians are for, isn't it?
Anyway, so look, any other questions, comments? Okay. No, that was me just raising my hand. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a quick one, Graham. As far as future technology goes, so what you've shown us here today, really great. But with AI and virtual reality, where do you see this heading in the future? Like applications like this, how could they be expanded using those new technologies?
Yeah, so maybe AI will be able to extract some of the information off the old plans and create that sort of data catalogue that Gioni was just talking about. If there was a way to search every piece of information off those old maps, there's a suburb called Glebe on one of those maps, and I'm like, where did that go? So that's been absorbed into Merewether at some point. But if you were searching for Glebe, you'd probably end up in Sydney, you know, on some sort of, like there's going to be nothing linking that area to that map.
It had to do with the Church of England.
Okay.
Glebe
Yeah, Glebe
Cemetery in
Road.
East Maitland.
It all makes sense. But yeah.
All right, well, look, put on your thinking caps, and then in 3 weeks you'll have an exhibition to indulge yourselves in and continue to thinking cap yourselves. And then by November, we want a solution.
So where is that exhibition?
It'll be downstairs in the foyer area just out the front of Special Collections. Yeah, so it should help bring, I guess, some of us know these sort of key plans, but I'd say that the wider community would know.
So these are the original maps you're bringing out now?
Some are only, I mean, we've only found the originals in the last few years. I mean, for instance, the Borrelia chart was reprinted in the Historical Records of Australia, New South Wales and Australia, but only a portion of it. So the rest of it, one particular version was sitting in the National Archives of the UK. Another one located by Andy McQueen, who was the biographer of Borrelia, found another one in the Hydrographic Office. So there's maps of ours lying all over the place, and we've sort of digitally repatriated them back here, shared them through our platforms so that local people can see them. But again, people aren't aware of a lot of our early mapping. So just be good to get that done, and then hopefully if those key plans and charts could be geo-referenced and beautifully prepared so that we can overlay them, then we've done quite a big job just there. The 20th century is pretty fine once you've got all the parish maps. They're scanned, put over the top, okay, but it's the early stuff that's a bit more difficult to bend to our will.
Any pre-colonial songline type stuff?
No, not really. I don't think so. I mean, look.
No, talk about dual naming.
Yeah, see, the thing is that we did go down that path a few years ago with people talking to us about Aboriginal mapping, right? And we were taken to Wollongby with the Northern Map site and described that this was Aboriginal mapping. But then we did an interview a couple of years ago with Ian Sim, who was one of the first surveyors to do the sites, and also had grown up with triple initiated men. And when we asked him the question about maps, his response was that they didn't need maps. Okay, the Aboriginal way of reckoning the landscape was almost like an art of memory approach, which is what Europeans also used to do before the advent of writing, where you had to remember things. And you see it in a book by Lynn Kelly called The Memory Code, which is Francis Yates' art of memory, but applied on an Indigenous level. So that really rocked our worlds a bit, because they said that there was no one undertook any journey in Australia without being assigned some kind of Aboriginal First Nations guide. And how were they getting there? They weren't following a map, they were following, another way of reckoning the landscape. So how you reconstruct that?
Yeah.
Well, a clue is in our roads, because a lot of the early roads are the original Aboriginal tracks. So that's one way to begin. And then the other thing is examining things like the NAGS maps to see how the land use was around the topography of the area. That's how I describe things to people when they're asking me. But for us, we're really dealing with the period of colonisation, because that's the map making was all done in order to have some kind of spatial idea of how they were going to exploit the place. So it's very,
It's very useful and mapping, isn't it? But it's all flat, you say?
yeah,
And the world's round.
it is, and full of bumps.
Right, yes, and that's right. Surveyors only don't bother about the bumps. They can put as contours.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, let's have a great round of applause for Graham.
We'll keep that app online for
Eternity.
yeah. We might make changes and add a few plans here and there, but it'll be freely available for anyone.
Frank started.
Thank you very much.
Was
All right, and so updates time, and we've got 20 minutes. So, any groups that wish to provide an update? Ron, over to you from the Fort Scratchley Historical Society.
Yes, thanks, Joni. Just on Sunday, we have our annual general meeting, but after the 1 o'clock time gun, the military band are playing a free concert in the fort. Everyone's welcome. Just bring a blanket or a chair to sit on. And it's likely to run for about an hour and a half or so. So it'll be in a bit of competition with the Newcastle Knights versus the Dolphins. Thank you. That's it.
No worries. Anyone else wish to provide an update?
I can say something about Wall's End.
Over to you, Robert.
Okay, so the Wall's End 150th, the events that I've been coordinating, which is about 38, we've done about 27 so far, spread over the whole year, and each of them has been really good because we targeted Wall's End people as opposed to the whole community, and there's lots of quirky little stories I can tell you, but one of them is when we have a presentation and there'd be 20 people there, and I'd say, I didn't throw this open to people from Belmont because we didn't want people coming in and saying, I've never been to Wall's End before, so we're just keeping it to Wall's End, and the Wall's End people have all gone, oh, that's how we want it. So I tapped into it, and some of you might be familiar with Trevor Dickinson. And
the Book of Wall's End. Oh my God.
So he did when he got in, they know all of that stuff, and because they've lived it. And so the 38 things that I've helped to organise over the year have all been done by volunteers who said, get out of my way, I can make that happen. So my role has been a coordinating role, which has been really good. And I should write up something about that at the end of the year, because it's different to other historical stuff that I've seen.
Those paintings that he had as you walk down to Newcastle Beach under the tunnels,
Yes.
they've all gone, and then put
Yes.
something else up there.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah,
It's amazing.
oh yeah.
It's his local book for local people in the Royston Basin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
thank
all.
you very much, Robert.
Okay.
It was excellent.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's going to do it with other suburbs as well.
Like I thought about the next one, I think is Merriweather. It's about 5 years' time. But I'm not sure whether Merriweather's got enough old families because it's got too many new people coming in. And there's I got to tell you, this is a quirky one. As I have a photo display, and it was older people coming along looking at them, and then a young couple came in, and they looked so out of place. And I said to them, "Oh, why are you looking at these?" And the lady said, "Oh, I'm from Sydney," and she turned and walked away. And the guy said, "I'm from Wallsend. We got married and we live in such and such a street." And he said, "And you know what? We got a letter because we've had a subsidence in our street and they're going to fill it in." That's a badge of honour, right, in Wallsend, to have known that there was a cave in your street. I think, wow, that's quirky. I don't think that's dangerous, but it's quirky, and an example of a deep running history in the society. Okay, and I talked too long.
No, that's very good. Okay, any other updates before we move on? Yep, John, over to you.
I'm muted. Just a couple of things. I'm giving a paper at the National Queer History Conference in Melbourne on the 21st. It'll be about policing gay love and sex in the Hunter, 1840 to 1977. It's a big one. I'm just trying to get my head around it and actually write something, but but I'll get there. It's I'll probably take the approach of well, I'm using the words of our Premier Chris Minns. He described the laws, the anti-homosexual laws, as making lives smaller, so that the laws actually constricted the lives of homosexual men in New South Wales. So they'll start with smaller lives and then do a then just trying to make it to develop a theme over that 100-year period. And the other thing was I'm finally kicking off the Piper's nightclub project, and that should involve, I hope it will, a collection of photographs of people who've taken photographs of the night there, and the and oral histories if we can get them, and possibly at the end of it some sort of written record. People who used to go to Piper's, it was so important in their lives, and their lives were absolutely amazing. Newcastle in the day. And so I hope that we can get that going. It'll be.
So for people that don't know where Piper's was, John, where was it and how long did it run for? I remember it in the 80s.
Yes, it was the 80s and early 90s. 810 and 800 Maitland, Hunter Street, Newcastle.
The ambassador.
It moved a couple of times, moved back and forward.
And it ran from the 1980s to the 1990s. Is that right?
Yeah. I think it was basically after the Star closed and kicked everybody out in that early '79. I think they made a move down to down the road to the Ambassador nightclub.
And once you read this paper, present this paper, where's it going to live online?
The one I'm doing on policing?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah. Kerry Bashford and I were going to do a book. I'm not sure whether it'll work or not, but it was initially just the work that we did up to 1952, and I've extended it right through to, well, basically 1972, and then at the end of it, David Marr from Sydney came up to do an expose of policing in Newcastle in 1977, and which sort of introduced the whole idea of Newcastle being sort of an arena of fear being generated by the police, who were absolutely obsessed in this murder investigation that the murderers had to be homosexual, and we had to do a homosexual witch hunt. So I've included that because I think that indicates, that's the clearest indication of what policing methods were used, including paid informants within the gay community to inform on others, which was pretty, I was shocked when I read that. You couldn't trust anybody. So it's been a bit of a revelation, and there's a few bright spots. The talk in Melbourne will be, you know, the couple of men who fought back and won an appeal in 1923, which was, I think, important. But I'm still writing it. I'm still sort of immersed and trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, John. Okay. We've got 5 minutes to go. Do you want to...
John, just on the note of Pipers, there might be footage in the NBN television archive, so I'll have a look and see, because they did plenty from the 1980s onwards. Now, next Saturday for a week we have New South Wales History Week. The theme is marking time, so I've just put the link in the chat, and it's worth just having a look to see what events are online too. So that runs for the whole week. Anyone here that hasn't seen the NBN television retrospective exhibition downstairs, it's on for another week and a half, so you're welcome to pop down and have a look at that. And that was it. Now there's a Stockton Historical Online Archive was launched about 2 weeks ago, so there's also a link to that on the Hunter Living Histories page. And a couple of students and myself went to see the Hollywood exhibition that's in at Newcastle Museum. Lachlan features in it. They've done a whole host of other oral histories. Some of our photographs in our collection are part of that exhibition. And I think it runs till about February. It's on for quite a while. So that's worth having a look.
So that's the estate that people
Yeah.
on.
So a few of us from this group went out there January last year, February.
Yeah, I think it was our visit that sparked all this, you know.
And Tim Adams.
When Tim Adams took us all out to
as the
Hollywood to go and
archaeologist.
see it, and all the old Hollywood people say, "Why'd you get a tour? Why we get invited?" And we
Yeah.
said, "Well, we didn't know you existed." Next minute,
So they've really been included.
yeah, so it's now become an exhibition and oral history. So sometimes you have to be invited somewhere, don't you? Yeah. So we've had a few. Anything else?
No, they're the only updates.
Okay. All right. So we've got some blog posts and on the Hunter Living History site as well. One that's in preparation still, which is the Cook, Lieutenant Cook one. It's Mark Matricus, so it was joined in this. I don't know if he's still here, but he's helping out. He sent me over the weekend 1 million links because we're trying to track down all of Cook's journals and copies of manuscripts and everything to find out exactly when he took possession of the entire east coast of Australia for the king. So it's a very interesting story because we don't have his words in the same form in each particular version. So, and also getting our heads around nautical time and civil time, because they reckon the beginning of the day at 12 noon if you're on a ship, as opposed to if you're on land, which you reckon at from 12 midnight, and it's like trying to do a Rubik's Cube. It's very doing our heads in. But anyway, we're still working on that. And also the video from the last Hunter Living History Showcase on thematic history has gone up online as well. So anyone that missed it can see it. And what's the other one? Oh, the presentation to the architecture students on modernity, which was interesting as well. I put up all my notes on that as well. All right, well, look, that brings the session to an end. Thank you, Graham, for being our presenter and discussion person. Thanks for joining us both on Zoom, and we'll see you next month for our October meeting on the 14th. Is that right? 14th.
14th.
Yeah, 14th, because we've got a long weekend now. All right, so see you then. for a subject yet to be announced.
A hotel.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.